Hi, and welcome to our webinar. For our Step into Security series, today we'll be presenting information on planning for security technology upgrades. My name is David Martin, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we get started, I'm going to give you some background history. Since 1998, LENSEC has been a trusted security and surveillance partner with experience in the USA and around the world.
David, we're still on hold. Let's reboot. Let me make sure that this gets started. Hang on, hold on just a second.
Okay.
It says our attendees are still on hold. Bear with me just a second. It's not starting. Hang on just a second. I'll pause here.
The change of the webinar viewing screen.
Yeah, but they can't hear us.
Okay.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, and welcome to our webinar. For our Step into Security series, today we'll be presenting information on planning for security technology upgrades. My name is David Martin, and I'll be your moderator today. LENSEC sponsors these webinars for us, and since 1998, LENSEC has been a trusted security and surveillance partner with experience in the USA and around the world. LENSEC has a background working with many types of industries, and we help customers develop enterprise solutions for complex physical security projects. We've developed a powerful security platform called Perspective Video Management Software, and this enterprise VMS streams and captures IP security video and incorporates video analytics, access control, and more into the software. I'll introduce our speaker in just a moment. First, I want to go over a few logistics for the webinar. We'll be taking questions during the webinar, and you may enter your questions in the GoToWebinar panel, bottom of the panel. We'll collect those during the presentation and answer questions at the end of the event. We'll also present poll questions during the event, and we encourage your participation in answering these questions when they are presented. At the end of the webinar, we'll present a survey for attendees. We'll ask that you answer a few quick questions to help us better serve you in future webinar events. And if you're interested in a completion certificate for today's webinar, indicate so on the survey. We'll follow up in a few days after the webinar with certificates, answers to questions, and a copy of today's presentation. Also, we record these webinars, post them on our website at lensec.com, and we'll provide you with the link to the webinar video archive as well. LENSEC sponsors these webinars monthly, and we cover a variety of safety and physical security information, so check back with us to find out what's coming up next in our Step into Security webinar series. Today's physical security expert is Jeff Kellick. He's the LENSEC Chief Product Officer. He has held various roles in sales, development design, and systems engineering, and is a certified security product manager. So please join me in welcoming Jeff. Hi, Jeff. How are you doing?
Thank you, guys. Thank you, David. As outlined, today we're going to present information on refreshing your security equipment, technology, and plan. This presentation is relevant for security directors, budgeting professionals, or systems integrators, assisting those responsible for implementing a security plan at a site or facility. We're going to use a slide deck to highlight some bullet points, which will be made available along with the recording of this webinar. but I encourage you to take notes on the talking points and please submit some questions which we will review at the end. I think we'll begin today with a poll question on what is the state of your current physical security system?
And just take a moment to select from the choices that you see there. It's perfect, wouldn't change a thing, needs some improvements, or it's in bad shape and quite antiquated, or you're just not sure. So we'll give you a few moments to answer that question there as to the state of your current security system. And looks like we've got some results. 50% say it's in bad shape, and 50% say it needs some improvement. So Jeff is going to walk us through the proper procedure to address your security system.
Very good. You know, now that you guys have considered this in your own mind, let us begin this content portion by discussing what a site assessment entails. Number one, we want to build awareness of your current status. Awareness is it's akin to running that white cloth on a fireplace mantle during a spring cleaning. I know I've said this before, but it really helps you realize how exposed your security infrastructure really is when you focus on what's been neglected. During this assessment stage, you want to analyze where your facility is vulnerable to intrusion, whether that's an attack, could it be vulnerable in argument escalations, physical violence, or of course liability concerns, slip and fall, etc. Finally, during this stage, you'll want to triage or rank your priorities, taking into account past goals and new modified areas of concern. Awareness begins with a site audit. A site audit will allow you and your team to look at how you are secured today. Analyze areas from locking hardware to the focus of the camera and housing cleanliness, which affects the visibility under various weather conditions. Look at your areas of strategic interest. What is your field of view covered by these security cameras or by guard, staff, personnel? Are you addressing any new or modified buildings? Or have new walls been added which impede traffic flow or visibility in case of an emergency or tactical situation? Look at your existing equipment. What can be carried over and still be effective? What technology pieces still hold calculated value? Do you have warranty coverage remaining on equipment? What about existing infrastructure that can be leveraged? Cabling, wiring, wireless, fiber trenching, HVAC. Human resources can change over time as well. Did you maintain the same personnel using security systems for monitoring or management? Guards, volunteers, administration staff. How do they use the system today? How have environmental factors affected your security plan? Have there been weather events that you can learn from? Hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, maybe up in the Northeast, snow and ice. Have these changed the grounds or created reminders of situations to account for the next time? Has the foliage changed, meaning have trees grown up which require trimming and affecting overall visibility? What about any strategies for crime prevention through environmental design, target hardening, image maintenance? Was that intended before? And if so, what is the effect currently? Where's your facilities and where are your people vulnerable? We've touched on this in greater detail in our series of school safety webinars, and we encourage you to check those out on our website. But as a generalized summary for all customers, one, you want to think about protecting your human assets first. We mentioned before from attack, internal violence, accident, and egress, as well as libelous negligence. As an example of the level of detail and consequence you may want to consider, if you're in the northern U.S., does an awning installed, maybe intended at an entryway to block sun glare from your camera views, does it have the potential for snow accumulation which may unintentionally result in accidental drifts or ice spears? You want to think about asset protection. Are your egress pathways from sensitive areas properly covered to see any assets being taken away, stolen? Have you considered RFID tagging any critical components? What about the property itself, the building, the grounds? Are there areas that are hidden and thus targets for vandalism or congregating by vagrants or troublemakers? You want to label areas of concern. Where are the current weak spots? What about faulty equipment or poor lighting conditions? Are there gaps in fencing? Are the door sensors or cameras flaky or ineffective? Identify areas of risk. Some entities may have a formal risk assessment performed by local professionals or law enforcement agencies. Assess community reports and crime trends. And finally, what about your adjacent environment? Have your neighbors changed over time since the last time that you did an assessment, the last time that you put something in? We're asking what has changed. Have your neighbors changed? Who is next door or down the street? Is it a chemical plant, health clinic, airport, a teen center? Do their activities or substances or products promote greater risk by who or what they bring into your proximity? Knowing your vulnerabilities can lead us to better understand the priorities that are needed. Triage by first visiting the original goals of the security plan. Are you meeting those original intentions? Are you exceeding them? Or are you now realizing, if we look at that poll question, maybe you are, that you are deficient against those original goals? If the latter, then the refresh plan also must account for and correctly prioritize those goals, if they're still pertinent as well. So, build a wish list of what you want to solve, not just what tech or products you want. Assess what has changed in needs or wants from the last security plan. What considerations come into play in prioritizing? As part of solving a current problem or deficiency, will there be a functional integration between subproducts or modules that require a prerequisite technology or infrastructure? Can your wish list accommodate for staffing concerns, meaning the ability to train staff and have users performing these functions as part of the plan? If possible, even as a rough draft or a napkin list, have this ordering and prioritizing done at some level before budgeting, so that you can revisit what is a want versus a need versus what's really mission critical when deciding on what you can afford today. Let's switch gears now and talk about assessing the physical security marketplace. What's the state of the current market? We'll review some new technologies, standards, and best practices in this section. But before we do, let's begin with a poll question. This section. Are you familiar with your current physical security technology? Meaning, do you attend trade shows, read industry rags, blogs, etc., to keep up in the advancement of security tech?
We'll take a few more. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, we'll give you guys a few seconds to answer that.
Yeah, you can select from, you have no idea what's available today, you know some current technology, but you need to update, or you're very familiar with current physical security technology. There we go. Looks like, again, 50-50, very familiar or need to update.
Okay. All right, what we'll take a look at now is a market assessment of the technologies. You're going to want to be briefed or perform some research on what technologies are most appropriate to solve the problems you identified during the site assessment. Today, there are many trends in innovative video security design, such as 360-degree sensor or camera technologies. These limit hardware footprint but provide a more comprehensive field of view. Megapixel cameras, of course, provide much greater detail for forensic or after-the-fact analysis that cover larger areas, such as parking lots or even long hallways. And then there's new compression technologies, or codecs, that better enable these aforementioned cameras to reside on a network for data transmission and long-term storage. Analytics provide the ability to make smarter decisions on what you're storing and how you're receiving alerts. These range from simple motion detection to more advanced learning algorithms. What about power consumption? In remote areas, fields, amphitheaters, parking lots, even with wireless data transfer, you still need to consider power resources. Today's technology includes a bevy of options from battery to wind and solar. Also, you want to consider what types of integration tools with alarms and alerts from various sensors or devices will help your staff and or responders be more efficient and situationally aware. When deciding on equipment and looking to cover your facility for a period of time, future-proofing until the next cycle, you'll want to consider warranties of equipment. What is standard? Can you get extended coverage, and how much of a premium is that? The resolution and codec ability. On the video side, we're of course driven by consumer electronics expectations. Resolutions continue to get higher and higher, and codecs continue to evolve to support these. However, not every camera or device supports many resolutions, nor every codec, or the ability to multicast, which means distributing that video to different sources with these codecs. Thus, take into account again what you are trying to solve. We talked about that before. You're planning what you want to solve more than your tech. Do you need high resolutions for live monitoring? If so, then perhaps you need a 4K monitor. Or is it just for reviewing after the fact, forensic detail? In that case, the monitor is not as important because you can zoom in to your area of interest. But storage may be more important, as you'll want to save the video for weeks or even months. What about PC technology? Storage, as I mentioned, is important to consider, as is your server equipment. For a critical piece, such as security, trying to repurpose an old, run-down desktop, it's probably just not going to cut it. Matter of fact, most software platforms have a certain minimum requirements depending on the size and scope. You want to check into these minimum requirements as you look to your system and evaluate the workload for each server. Another item to consider is that multi-monitor display or video walls may require higher graphics cards installed. Finally, getting value in technology is always something worth consideration. Similar to consumer electronics, when a new shiny widget is introduced into the industry, there is a corollary downward price pressure on that outmoded equipment. This does not mean that a lesser technology, say a 1.3 megapixel camera, is a poor choice for your hallway view. Rather, by looking at the problem you are trying to solve, you may end up finding that you can get more bang for the buck by opting for a not so cutting edge device. The key is assessing what technology fits what need. Now, on the market assessment standards, I'm going to be quick here, but the point to drive home is that there are standards bodies in physical security. Most are driven by associations of consortiums or manufacturers. Recognizing these bodies helps to future-proof your architecture and ensure compliance across products. The more popular in physical security are ONVIF for device device connectivity compliance, and NEMA for outdoor enclosure ratings such as IP66 or IP67. But there are more, including PSIA, which is similar to ONVIF. The key is understanding how the technology you choose leverages or complies with select standards to help solve your problem. For instance, if you're mounting equipment outside, you want to ensure the equipment is rated for the correct NEMA levels to endure expected weather conditions. Similarly, if you're leveraging equipment that is from disparate manufacturers, by ensuring some level of ONVIF testing, you can work to ensure cross-compatibility. ASIS, the American Society for Industrial Security, began in 1955. So let us say that modern security practices have been evolving for about 60 years. These practices of note for security refresh program should revolve around installation, commissioning, monitoring, and evaluating all the above. Installation practices will focus on timing and resource management, taking into account existing turnover of equipment, thus optimizing any downtime and also planning for weather and seasonal variables. Project commissioning should ensure each site or phase has checkpoints or gates that must be accepted in order to continue with the plan. Monitoring existing equipment as well as new will ensure that security gaps are accounted for and ancillary coverage can be provided to protect induced vulnerabilities. Evaluation routines. Evaluation or sign-offs should be formulated with common goals in mind to ensure project satisfaction. Thus far, we've walked through site assessment points and we've analyzed what's on the market today. Next comes planning the transition from legacy systems to the latest and greatest. This means understanding the current budget as well as your resource allocation. What are the hard costs, technology, contract labor, etc. Also, what are the soft costs, such as administrative time allocated, user availability, construction conflicts. Determine if these will be a one-shot deal or if you're going to do a multi-phased approach. Then communicate with all parties involved and do so often. Look to learn from what just happened. If you have to do something repeatedly, such as install a camera on a parking pole at 10 different facilities, then improve iteratively by adjusting the plan where it makes sense to do so. So let's take a minute to talk during the planning section about the dollars and cents. In planning, determine if you're using funds allocated for capital budgets, one-time purchase, or does security and facilities upgrades constitute an operational expenditure for your organization. Your accounting team will help you decide which portion of the product falls under what area, and it may end up freeing additional funds for improvement or services. Speaking of services, if looking for funding from different budgets, you'll want to determine what portion of the scope is for equipment versus professional services and regular training. Funding sources care about this too. Many more grants over the years have been earmarked for training or specific scope improvements. By targeting these grants and bonds, you can organize your budget to encompass more of your priority rankings or wish list. Also note, scheduling vehicles such as TCPN or GSA or buy board, these can help you facilitate navigating the bidding requirements with ease, saving both time and monies. Another question is, should you buy or lease solutions? This harkens back to that idea of capital costs versus operational expenditures. Again, your accounting folks can help you with this idea of purchase versus financing. Often overlooked, what resources internally are you allocating to this process? Have you budgeted your staff's time and prepared for facilities to be open during off hours when necessary? Phasing. Phasing is a common practice in major upgrades or refreshment projects. While some organizations can afford to cut over cold turkey Most need to acclimate in a structured or phased approach. Some phases last months, while others can take years and thus become almost an infinite loop of system refreshments. When planning for phases, you want to think about the pitfalls in setting up items like installations to avoid bad times a year, if possible, to save on costs. You may want to avoid the winter or rainy seasons. Perhaps do an exterior phase in the summer and an interior refreshment phase in the winter. On the software side of the refreshment, phasing new software in over time allows for users to become acclimated by providing a grace period in order to train on new software, while still accessing the old mission critical for emergencies. Of course, also realize that what is familiar to a user may also serve as a crutch, creating that unintended result of extended the time for user adoption. So it's something to balance there. You want to make sure that you can handle the mission critical emergencies, but also you're not giving too much of a crutch to your existing users. Finally, when planning the software portion of the refreshment program, understand that PC equipment, it does have a shelf life. We talked about that a few slides ago. But so do the operating systems running on those PCs. Most software today has select requirements to accommodate needed network security standards, which were just not available in older OSs. This means planning to upgrade not just software, but operating systems, web browsers, and system patches, Windows updates. You want to put that into account as well. Remember, this may mean rebooting servers several times, which could require good remote control applications or even a person on-site physically at the server. Even big projects come down to small moving parts that must be communicated between two or more parties. Assuming the other party knows what's happening is the death knell of many a project manager. That assumption, right? What you want to do is you want to have a forum or pathway for communication between the project owners of each objective or scope and a user representative. This can be via phone or meetings, email, explicit documentation or risers, or we've even seen it effectively done through texting. Maybe a combination of all of the above. You want to make sure that if a GC, general contractor, is involved, they're aware of the chosen subcontractors, and that each know their primary point of contact to address should questions arise or new points about lessons learned during the implementation come up. Remember, this refreshment program should be smoother and more effective by definition than the last security plan or installation. So communicate. Communicate and make it so. Lastly, do not forget about other departments. Make sure IT is in the loop as well as facilities and administration. Depending on which side of the fence you're on, make sure you're inclusive and help those other groups along with you. Very good information from all sides. Deadlines. They need to be communicated, and the expectation should be clear to all parties involved so that objections, if there are any, can be ironed out well in advance. Don't assume that everybody's in line because one document set a deadline. Make sure that it's communicated over and again. You want to iron out those objectives beforehand. My favorite topic is iterative improvement. Now it's a buzz phrase in software development, and it's a tenet of Agile philosophy. We're an Agile shop. But the reason why is because it just makes sense, and we all do it in life by default. When we grab a hot pan and get burned, the next time we wear an oven mitt. We took a lesson learned and improved on our processes. You want to take that thought process forward to how you plan through a refreshment program. You've learned about your technology, better practices on training the right people, communication exercises and meetings, and even evolve standing operating procedures. Just because you're already refreshing your system hardware and software, do not let the improvements stop there. Take your experience in process and apply it during the migration so that you can learn even more to improve the next phase of the process or the next step of the process. I'll give a couple of examples that we've said before. Last time, Officer Keith may have complained about being blindsided by the software when there was a VIP coming to the facility. He pointed out he didn't know what to do. So this time, you want to ensure that Officer Keith is in the training program before the new software was phased in. Or, if we learn the IT department has just installed a new data center with an uninterrupted power and advanced climate-controlled HVAC, therefore we can improve by installing security equipment there instead of one of those antiquated IDF rooms that, they have leaking roofs or blown fuse every time a thunderstorm comes in, right? We want to learn from that. What about procedures that were interrupted during other installations? Can these be accounted for so that new cameras are in place during non-critical hours? If sun glare always affects the focusing of the camera while installing at 9 a.m. on the east side of the building, then next time, schedule those installs for 2 in the afternoon. That way it maximizes the install time and the quality of the installation. Those are just some simple examples of how you can pick up and learn during the process of implementation. Implementation itself. Finally, the rubber meets the road. Every project, even a refreshment plan, will have challenges. Communicate those hurdles. Discuss who can clear the way, enlist their help, and then overcome them. In other words, execute the plan. Train, educate, and train some more. Heroes are made of folks who can bring their staff something that makes them more efficient and that they can understand. Training is the key to that understanding. At that point, there is customer satisfaction and project sign-off. Talking about implementation, let's have one more poll question. Are you today already familiar with the obstacles you will experience when implementing a project? Are you already familiar with the obstacles you will experience when implementing a project?
Yeah, we'll give you just a few minutes to answer these. Choices being, I've never done this before, don't know what to expect, it's been a while, or this is familiar to me, or you're just not sure. So we'll see what the results here are on our third poll question. And the results should be coming in here any moment. There they are. 100%, this is familiar to me and I know what to expect. Good.
Very good. Okay. Some of the hurdles and concerns. Let's talk about some obstacles and who is responsible to overcome them. Project management. Project managers are critical in leading an implementation through to completion, in part because they can identify obstacles and work with the right people to remove them expeditiously. One way to do this is to host regular stand-up meetings. These are quick status updates where contractors, users, and resources can identify what their objectives are for the near term and what, if any, items are blocking their path. If there's an obstacle, then identify allies to help resolve that obstacle. Maybe it's a network engineer who can open up a firewall port, or a facilities supervisor who can grant vehicle access to a field. There are always allies in which to build bridges to overcome these various challenges. Once resolved, move on quickly and overcome the next one. Executing a refresh program has several moving parts. Field hardware, switches, cameras, lens, mounting equipment may all have to be replaced or additional devices installed. Software itself includes a data transition or migration. Executing the migration requires foundational understanding of the expectation and scope. Are user passwords being reset? Is Active Directory employed? Are the devices getting new names or locations? All of these will affect new features and the operational SOPs. Infrastructure updating. New cameras with higher bandwidth requirements may prompt an update to new gigaport switches. Similarly, upgrade from coaxial cable to Cat6 cable. These items need to be installed in concert to tell if the field devices are mounted properly. If execution of the network is delayed, so will the camera installation, as the technician cannot verify server communication or even potentially focus the field of view. Executing on a system overlap or redundancy plan is also a fine point. Most entities do not have the ability to accommodate two fully redundant systems. Therefore, oftentimes, a demonstration site with a transitional server is employed to allow users to train on and use one site, while others remain status quo. Once acclimated, then the cutover can take place. Upon cutover, the expectations should meet with reality, and if planned correctly and executed well, then those expectations should be met. Training on a new system is critical. Again, heroes are made of folks who can bring their staff something that makes them more efficient and that they can understand. Who needs to be trained? Day-to-day users need the most training, which is typically hands-on or classroom-based. Infrequent users, these may be school administrators, city managers, plant supervisors, they should receive an overview as well as go-to personnel when they have questions. They can also be given access to videos or documentation. Admins, system administrators, they require a different level of training. Oftentimes, they're going to be the ones responsible for managing users and equipment. What about responders? Law enforcement agencies, if available, can be gathered in as well. This is especially well received if coordinated with other training exercises, and can even sometimes be funded by these law enforcement grants that we spoke of earlier. Even contractors who will use the system, these may be security guards, outsourced IT, etc., they should, if required as in their function, have a training set aside and planned for as well. This can be done through classroom-based information, video tutorials, documentation, which include user manuals, and the all-important quick reference guide. Commissioning a site to go live is the final step of a project, but it's not the end of the refreshment program. Sign-off of the project confirms the acceptance by all of the plan and its execution. However, the next step is servicing and maintaining the system. There are many variables, and we talked about on several in this webinar. And these obstacles, they're not static. They're going to introduce new conditions and new challenges that you'll have to deal with. A good service plan will allow for minimum downtime, and proactive maintenance will extend the life of the system. Don't forget about remote monitoring either, for health status checks and system integrity. This helps safeguard against future problems, allowing confidence in the installation from day one through year one and beyond. During this webinar, we also wanted to talk about a couple of case studies. This is real-time implementations where LENSEC has replaced an existing VMS or existing projects and what we had to work through, what we had to overcome. So one in particular is a school district down in Texas, Pflugerville Independent School District. This particular customer had a VMS, a video management software platform, that didn't quite meet their requirements. Their district-wide needs were not being met. Their user login requirements were a little bit less than par. So what we ended up doing for them is we analyzed and we created a scope that gave them a district page, giving them a single sign-on to access all of the schools in the district. This question of what their need was, that they identified that need, was built into the implementation plan. So in this case, all of their schools are now reachable from their district page. Everything can be achieved from one login. School resource officers can better access video from multiple schools simultaneously. With prospective VMS, we could employ Active Directory integration. This is better because the administrators don't have to separately manage each user. In addition, the previous VMS had a thick client installation for workstations. Updates had to be installed on each machine. This was time-consuming for administrators, IT, and staff. The new solution, in this case, again, identified the scope, the need, what needed to be done. The new solution runs on a thin client, meaning updates are deployed on servers. Workstations access software features and security video through browser access to the servers. No software updates are required on these workstations. The plan for the district including planning for summer installation before the school started. At this site, there were 18 servers in total at the time of installation. It has since grown. And existing servers were used and leveraged. There was an assessment on that hardware, and it was realized that those could be reused. We evaluated the server in advance and made sure they met the necessary requirements. We also had to evaluate the district needs for balancing archive storage across the server. The team also had to plan camera assignments for those servers. In this case, those servers were able to be staged remotely. Configuration files were prepared in advance, making the deployment faster. Again, learning from previous installations, being able to do that in advance saved a lot of time. The installation team configured 16 servers for camera management. A separate web server and a separate database server, in this case, were also deployed based on the scope. Second to the initial installation was a plan for phased camera upgrades. So with over 4,000 cameras district-wide and many different camera types, there's a mix of existing cameras and plans for new cameras. The big challenge was with certain camera manufacturers that had 4 sensor alignments, and they were limited due to the way they were installed. Some of the images had a lesser than desired quality, and then each camera view required its separate stream. So the LENSEC team was working with the district to unify those streams by using different types of camera models, both 360-degree and 180-degree cameras, to limit the overall number of streams and bandwidth, as well as improve resolution. This is part of a phased approach to replace the cameras, not all at once, but bringing them in over time, accounting for the camera's warranty and normal replacement cycle. Another plan that needed to be taken into account was refreshed network infrastructure. The district had planned a district-wide upgrade to their network infrastructure. They installed a 10 gigabit backbone to each school in order to improve the network backhaul. This is a great alignment between IT and facilities and the plans of each to accommodate the scope that was required. More bandwidth was required due to the higher megapixel cameras which were being added to the existing schools. So there was a demand for higher resolution, so the network infrastructure was put in place in conjunction. The project team helped the district to understand these bandwidth requirements due to the number of cameras and megapixel cameras needed per each individual campus. Part of the planned upgrade included replacing switches that could handle the additional throughput necessary for the traffic. There's also phased server upgrades. As the district is growing, adding new stadiums, adding new infrastructure, and servers age, a plan has been prepared to replace those servers along with the new equipment. This includes more processing power on the replacement servers themselves. Networking throughput, as we discussed, has already been improved, so the servers need to handle that as well with items like a 10 gigabit NIC to allow that bandwidth throughput on the server. Also, higher density or higher spinning drives to allow for greater input-output writing to each drive. As part of the physical side of the infrastructure, the district planned security upgrades, physical upgrades, adding vestibules at school entries. This is a receiving area at each school, then would this route traffic through that entry area. Our team has worked with school officials to add those vestibule cameras to see that traffic flow as designed. As we move to a summary, I'm going to pass the slide back to David for the conclusion to talk about the rest of the system and to address any questions that may have come up. We had an opportunity, and I'm thankful for you guys joining us today, to talk about the state of your system, understanding the market, and then transitional planning based on that knowledge and information learned through to an implementation cycle. We even had an opportunity to talk about a specific case study. So with that, David, were there any questions that may have come up throughout the conversation that we wanted to drill in a little bit further?
Yes, let me just gather those, and then I'll present them to you, and you can respond. Here's a good question, Jeff. It's how often should a business plan for an upgrade at their facility?
Yeah, so that is a good question. It does depend on the different type of facility and what their goals are and what challenges they have, of course. But on the whole, most entities that we've seen in the industry average a refreshment cycle every 5 to 7 years. And that typically corresponds with the expiration or the failure rate of the infrastructure, whether it's the cameras or the server
the technology. Okay. Well, here's another that's kind of open-ended, but it is, how do I determine what technology I need? Maybe for instance, whether it's wireless, wired, megapixel, lower resolution, so forth and so on.
Yeah, that's a challenging question. It's something that you really have to think through as to what it is that you're trying to accomplish as a user, or what your user is trying to accomplish, right? So you may have a mix of different technologies. If you're thinking about a hallway and you want to ensure that you can see the face of everybody that walks down that hallway because it's a high trafficked area and you know that you're going to need to look at it forensically, you're going to take into account the number of megapixels that you're going to choose on those types of cameras. Similarly, if you want to put cameras in a parking lot area or if you want to put cameras outside, you want to think about what it is you're trying to solve for. Do you need to pick up license plates from the vehicles that come in and park in that parking lot? If so, you need to ensure that from where your camera's mounted, it has clear field of view. There's no obstacles in the way to where the license plate would traverse through the intersection, and that you have a high enough megapixel, and you're recording at a high enough frame rate to pick up that traffic. And that frame rate will then have an impact on how much storage you would need. You'd also want to think about overall retention time. What are the examples, when you look back at the incidences at your facility, how long does it take for something to be reported? We've had examples of schools that choose to record at 45 or 60 days, colleges, 45 or 60 days, because they know that sometimes they'll have professors that go on sabbatical and they don't come back and report an actual incident for a couple of months. And therefore they've decided to extend their retention to accommodate that frequent occasion for them. So it really is about understanding, as we go back to the beginning of the slide deck, understanding what are the challenges that you're facing and what are you trying to solve. With that, you can start to identify the technology pieces that are available that can solve that problem. But also, as we said, if what you're trying to solve for may not always be the latest and greatest technology, you may be able to get more bang for your buck by using a little bit older of the technology, or in the case that we pointed out was a lesser resolution camera, because you have a smaller, more confined area, and all you really need is just general coverage of that area. Well, then it doesn't make sense to put a 5 megapixel camera in an area where 1 or 2 megapixels will do, right? So it is an open-ended question, but it really goes back to identifying what it is that are the areas of concern. And a lot of that, again, goes back to the previous assessment that was done. What were the goals and objectives then, and are you accomplishing those today? And if so, great. If not, what are those areas of deficiency that need to be addressed going forward?
Thanks, Jeff. We've got one other question here. If you need to ask your questions, please do so. Just type them into the bottom of the GoWebinar panel. If not, we may finish up a few minutes early here. I'll throw out this last question. It's asking about consultants. Are there consultants that will help assess our vulnerabilities at our site?
Absolutely, and there's some very good ones out there. A lot of times you'll find consultants that have a background in law enforcement, maybe coming from different police agencies or federal agencies that have taken to security consulting. They have a very good idea to understand not only the physical vulnerabilities that may be available to you or maybe around you, but also the adjacent neighbors, what the crime rates are in the area, what the weather variables are, the environmental factors from tornadoes, hurricanes, those types of things. All of those play into what make your facility vulnerable. And having a good, proper assessment done by a qualified consultant can really go a long way in ensuring that you are meeting what the scope is for you or your customer, depending on your point of view. But yes, there are a lot of great consultants out there. The International Association of Professional Security Consultants can be accessed online and can give you a list of highly qualified professionals, as well as American Society for Industrial Security, as is, and the Security Industry Association, SIA, all will be able to provide good information for well-qualified consultants to provide that VA or vulnerability assessment.
Thank you, Jeff. And don't forget, we'd like for attendees to complete a quick survey at the end of this webinar. On the survey, again, you can request a completion certificate. We'll email out some of the items promised. We'll also send answers to questions that came in today. Again, the webinar is recorded and will be posted on our video archive on the LENSEC website in a few days. You'll find it at www.lensec.com. And also you'll find previously recorded webinars covering a variety of topics related to physical security in our Step into Security webinar series. I'd like to take one last opportunity to thank Jeff for taking the time to speak with us today. My name is David Martin with LENSEC. You'll see both of our contact information posted there, phone numbers and email. Don't hesitate to use them if you have any questions or we can help you further. That does wrap up the webinar. Thanks everyone for attending, and we'll see you again next month with another installment of our Step into Security webinar series. Thank you again. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, David. Have a great day.